If one were to look at the lineup for EVO 2019, you'd see a pretty good snapshot of the state of fighting games. Juggernauts like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate were side by side with staples like Street Fighter V and Tekken 7, with newcomers Samurai Showdown and Soul Calibur 6 getting their chances to show off on the community's largest stage. There was, however, one title that definitely stuck out quite a bit from the rest of the pack. It didn't have a Pro Tour or long-standing EVO legacy, and if you weren't a fan of their games already, you probably barely know the developer. That title? Under Night In-Birth X Latest. How did a niche title like Eunice make it into the EVO lineup 7 years after its initial arcade release? To answer that question, we spoke to some of the core members of the Uni scene to learn more about that community story. And to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about French Bread.
So French Bread is a game developer that's basically a doujin circle. They kind of just made their games super grassroots style. They're definitely known most for making Melty Blood, the fighting game based on Tsukihime. But that was where they got their popularity, and then they haven't really made that many games. There's a couple other obscure games before Melty Blood, but most people know them from Melty Blood. So Under Night In-Birth was definitely the first really big thing that they came out with after Melty Blood, because they made many versions of Melty Blood. They basically were just updating Melty Blood for like 10 years.
Chuck some knives, chuck some rocks. Checking everything.
It is air traffic control. You're not cleared to jump in the sky.
You're
Stay
still
grounded.
If you know of Guilty Gear, the next big thing was French Bread and Melty Blood when it came to anime. Because outside of Guilty Gear, there was BlazBlue, and BlazBlue was made by the same people. But when it came to a different company within like that anime area or like anime spectrum, it's always been French Bread. So with Under Night coming out, it was definitely a breath of fresh air, because back then, like 2014, before Guilty Gear came back with like this big grand bravado with Xrd, it was the first one we've seen in like 6 or 7 years.
My first experience with Under Night, we saw the announcement. You know, Under Night In-Birth coming out, new game from French Bread, so everyone's like, oh, it's Melty 2. The characters were pretty interesting, pretty different, but also very French Bread. But there was no console version, so we kind of just watched from the sidelines. And that game was kind of bad, if I'm gonna be real. It had a lot of infinites, it was just kind of a broken game.
It was a very experimental game where you essentially have infinites that don't kill you. They pretty much time you out. You have 99-second infinites in that game.
The very first version was insane. Everybody had infinites and did crazy damage. There was no limits to wall bounds or any of that.
When the first console version came out, it was Uni L, and that game was completely different than the original Under Night In-Birth. So they actually rebalanced the game completely, just overhauled it entirely. So it was actually a bit of a surprise for a lot of us. I think we were going in there expecting it to be another Flavor of the Month game where you kind of mash it out and then start playing it like, whoa, this game's actually really different.
In Unio, which is the second version of the game that we got here on consoles, it was very grounded. Like, there were characters like Merkaba, the big monster, and Batista, like the robot, that could kind of go into the air, but like when you were fighting Gordo, the big scythe dude, you really just couldn't jump that much. So it's really like a game of inches, and like, can I control like the meter cycle? Can I control the grid cycle to allow me to get my turn?
The up back.
Sushi's
You
scared.
can't punish? No.
Sushi's scared. Sushi's scared.
It's a reset.
2 gigabyte gets the reset.
Wow.
In Under Night, it's pretty difficult to find frame advantage. It's hard to keep your turn. You know, in other games, you know, normals are +2, +3 is fine. You know, in Under Night, something that's like -1 is considered really good. Most things are naturally like -2, -3, or even worse. So you kind of have to use the threat of your chain normals to frame trap people. And if you end with something that's not cancelable and it's minus, it's absolutely over. You can't do anything. On top of that, the Vorpal system is probably the most iconic mechanic for Under Night. So it's a separate bar on the bottom. And basically it's like a tug of war game with these blocks called grid, and there's a circle, a cycle that takes 17 seconds to complete, and at the end of the cycle, whoever has more blocks gets Vorpal, which is basically powers up their character, gives them access to new moves.
So if you successfully hit somebody or you press forward, basically, it slowly goes up. But like, if you get hit or if you get thrown, there's a big swing back to the other side. So you're trying to control as much of that individual like resource within this amount of time while you're fighting, you know, the people on the screen.
If I have Vorpal, then my character gets a special trait, unless you're Mika. If you're Mika, then you don't, you XD harder, I don't know. Most characters get a special trait, like their normals do more chip, they get access to another special move, they lose less life if you're Carmine, something like that. And you're allowed to change shift, so like stop the clock. You see that screen freeze? That's where everyone's just like, oh, okay, they're trying to see what's going on in the screen and react accordingly.
Chain shift is basically like a time stop. It cancels whatever you're doing. So it's a really powerful tool because if someone's just doing like a frame trap on you, you can actually just mash chain shift, and then as soon as they have a gap, boom, you can like DP them or do whatever you want. So it's a kind of game where Vorpal empowers your character. It lets you have much scarier offense to roll over your opponent. It's also a really great way to be secure on the defense. You can be knocked down and know that, well, no matter what happens, I can wake up chain shift and see the mix-up if there's a mix-up or whatever. So it gives you access to a lot of tools. The thing we like to talk about in Under Night is that the Vorpal cycle is often more important than the life lead. It's okay to maybe take a little bit of damage if you're gonna win Vorpal, because once you win Vorpal, the rest of your gameplay really unlocks. So that's probably the most iconic thing about Under Night, is that it's a game that rewards good defense through a separate resource. There's a forced ebb and flow basically of the game, right? Like every 17 seconds, something important is gonna happen. And so you know that that guessing game that occurs is extremely, you know, momentous. You know, it's kind of a slow game, but at the same time, both players are kind of forced to keep a certain pace.
But the version that we got was a little bit better, but there was still some outlandish stuff in there, like the Waldstein Infinite. Waldstein had an Infinite, and also just still busted damage all around.
All right, here we go. Woo! That's it. That's it. I'm going to the gym.
The balance in EL was honestly pretty crazy. The top 3 characters were not only really strong, but they were strong in a way that spectators really got turned off. Obviously, the big one is Gordeau. A lot of people just watched Gordeau just murder people in EL, kill them in 2 combos, command grab them from like, you know, his full range poke away and things like that. That was definitely, I think, something that maybe turned off the casual player. And also just seeing those kind of weaker characters really have a hard time. You know, Akatsuki, Seth, Nanase, Chaos, Byakuya, like those characters definitely considered very underpowered in EL. The community was, I think, very interesting in the beginning because the game is so different. It's not like Melty Blood, it's not like Guilty Gear, it's not like BlazBlue, it's not like Street Fighter, you know. If you ask different people, they'll describe this game in all kinds of different ways, honestly. From anime Street Fighter to anime KOF to Melty 2 to Footsie Melty to whatever you have it, right? So no one could really pin down where this game lay as far as the most overlap. And so because of that, people from all kinds of different games really converged for this game when EL first came out. It was really hot, honestly, for the first couple months, just because of that factor. You know, whenever a new game comes out, there's always definitely that early competition where people just want to see how good they are and, you know, come and beat up people that they don't know and things like that, and like prove which games, you know, which game you come from is the best, that kind of thing. So, you know, we had people from KOF, we had people from Street Fighter, we had people from all the different anime scenes trying the game out.
Despite a 6-month gap between Japanese and English console releases, the Unial scene in America maintained enough that many believe it would be in consideration as a main game for that year's EVO. In the past, getting even one anime title in EVO seemed at times a struggle in itself, and with Guilty Gear Xrd being one of the newest titles in the genre, it seemed to be the shoe-in to take that spot. Nevertheless, the Uni community held out hope that maybe 2 titles could make it in that year, and to their surprise, 2 did. However, neither of them were Unial, with Guilty Gear Xrd and an outdated version of Persona 4 Arena Ultimax chosen instead, leaving the Unial scene to question why.
It was the second year that Persona got in, so I think that was the big buzzkill for a lot of players because Persona numbers were pretty low. If you look at majors, it was like very small, you know, 30s, things like that, 40s. And, you know, Uni had been doing pretty good. So a lot of us were really hoping that we'd get Uni that year, honestly. A lot of us had our fingers crossed because that was like the year. It was the hot year for Uni. And if we look back in hindsight, it definitely petered a little bit after that. So it was definitely, you know, a buzzkill to have it not show up at EVO.
That December, we had about 100-something plus tournament for Under Night, and that was kind of unheard of for an anime game. So with that, we thought like, oh yeah, we're definitely gonna get some sort of notice, and we're just gonna be at EVO. They'll put us as like a Saturday game, whatever, we don't care. And then it came out like, what's going on here? What do you mean Silent Persona? But people were still dissuaded, and they were just like, what's going on here? I thought you're looking at the numbers. And there's an infamous tweet from Flux. He said, unfortunately not in EVO lineup. And I remember reading that and I was just like, part of me was just like, oh, that's funny, but part of me is just like, come on, man. Like, I wanted this game in here too, but like, at that time I understood how EVO worked with how they select their games. They're obviously looking at the community support, they're looking at the support from the developers, and they hadn't heard anything for about 2-3 years. We didn't have any idea what was supposed to come out. Like, there's no talk about ST. We thought it was just gonna be an arcade forever on PS3 and that's it. So 2016, the same thing happens essentially. We're like, all right, we got it. We're still showing up to our majors, it's not as big, we got it this year. Nothing. And we're at that point, we're just like, maybe we just stop playing the game because no one's noticing?
It definitely impacted the overall numbers of the community because after that year and for the couple years leading up to the ST release, there was definitely a decline in numbers. So the EVO announcement was a big part of that, but another big part of that was the delay of the console port. So ST, the current version we're on, the first version of ST came out in arcades a little bit after EL, and we didn't get that console port for quite a while actually. They said they were working on it and it just took a really long time. And it's that kind of anime Arxis cycle is what a lot of people call it, is when you're just sitting on the old version basically waiting for the JP devs to come out with the new version or the current version, right? So yeah, no one really feels too happy about playing what they know is an old version when other parts of the world are playing the new thing.
I came a little after that year's EVO because like it was really big. I heard like Next Level Battle Circuit had like 64 people. It was like super popular, and everybody was like, okay, if this gets into EVO, like I'm gonna play this game, and it didn't. So after that, like the kind of surrounding buzz just died. So if you really wanted to play the game, like you had to like really dive into it. And so, at least as far as the scene goes, like everybody kind of knows each other because like we started so small. And like even through EL, I think the largest tournament after that, like before the latest version came out, was somewhere like 50, 60, 70 kind of entrants. It was still low, but like just the really dedicated people got together and played it a lot.
EVO had come and gone, and the Uni players that were left in its wake decided to take matters into their own hands. If no one else was going to showcase their game, they were going to have to rally together and do it themselves.
So there were a few people in the Uni community that said, hey, we're going to go to these tournaments here. These tournaments are open to us and welcoming us, for year after year, no matter how old or how outdated the version is. If we're going out to a certain tournament, we're going to represent and do numbers for it. I think from there, there's just this little group of people that just started just moving around to tournament and growing from tournament to tournament, and they started being a little more organized with their events and how they were going to get together and play the game and show the game out.
I was a tournament organizer for Brawl in the Midwest, but like one of the things that I always noticed, and like we also paid attention to the Skullgirls community, was like there are too many of us spread out. Like overall, like you might have 5 to 6 people here. I don't know, maybe the larger scene has like 12 or so, like in New York or something like that. It's like, instead of just like going to these smaller like regional tournaments, how about we try our best to meet up like at some big events? Like it doesn't have to be a ton, like maybe 1 to 3.
Around 2017, when we got word of ST coming out, / we knew when we was gonna be on console, Drunken Suika, he made the Discord for like the global. And he was just like, all right, if you're from, just come into here, you'll say what region you're from, and if you're looking for games, you go, like netplay games, you go into like a specific channel that's just for netplay. And that's why Discord is very popular nowadays, because everything's centralized. You go to Discord, you go to one of the main channels, because there's a main Uni Discord now, but like there's different regions now. There's a Northeast, there's a West Coast, there's Mexico, there's Canada.
Discord was like a sigh of relief. I didn't have to go to some random forum or some like IRC if I wanted to talk to some people and some people here. And I really wanted to encourage people of all skill levels and backgrounds to just come to one central place. So like I could easily talk to like Squish, who's the best Akatsuki in North America. If I wanted to talk to him about something, I don't have to find some other thing. You make relationships, you talk to the people every day, you talk to people about the game, and you try to introduce more people into the scene. So like sometimes I think in some other games, you might have like top players kind of separate away from like the general core, but like everybody basically has access to everybody. Like there aren't too many top players who aren't in Discord. There aren't too many players that like want to get in the game. Like one of the first things that we do is like, here's Discord, here's a bunch of these resources that we've archived. If you have any questions, like people are around. But like it just kind of organically grew that way.
With the Uni community now united and growing, it seemed primed for an explosion with just the right spark. That spark came in the form of Under Night In-Birth X Latest, the latest version of the game to hit consoles. Just like Unio, there was a 6-month delay between Japanese and English versions, but because of all the hard work the community had done in the interim to grow their game, its player base started to spike with both releases. The Uni boom was now in full effect.
There's a lot of factors that go into the expansion, the boom of the Uni community from ST onwards. First of all, the game is a little more aggressive. It's a little bit less defensive than EL, and that makes it a lot more accessible to newer players because attacking is way more fun than defending, right? I mean, you just pressing buttons and getting to do your thing, taking your turn, that's always way more fun. So ST helps a little bit, especially at the lower level. You have a lot more offensive tools to kind of like break down your opponent's defensive barriers and things like that. So the power level kind of went up a bit. New characters are pretty cool too. Even the the weaker ones, quote unquote, definitely have a lot of popularity riding behind them. Like Akatsuki being a lot better is a pretty cool thing. He was kind of like a low tier hero in EL, and obviously players like Squish really put him on the map in EL, but it was just a real struggle. So the balance overall in ST is much better, and it's a much better spectating experience, I think.
Yeah, because he knew Troll was going to try to press the button. Oh my god! Oh, wait, that's it, that's it.
The CBO? Yeah.
Sivo?
Oh my god.
Let's go!
It was really surprising because like people knew that it was like a dope game, but people were kind of on the fence like, this is cool, and like I'm watching people at the scene and like everybody's invested. Like players that weren't in top 8s and things like didn't leave. They stayed and like spectated and like cheered and everything. So they saw the atmosphere. It was like, I kind of want to get in, but it's kind of too difficult right now. So like when English came and everybody was like, oh my god, look at the tutorial. Oh my god, like so you had the like energy around it. You had the English release, and then like it was on sale, and so like hashtag play Eunice or hashtag whatever like really blew up. I really think it was just kind of like a freak accident of sorts. We all knew the game was good and we all knew people were watching us, but like I don't think that we really knew how the perfect spiral would happen. Like maybe the fact that like Guilty Gear was in a spot where like they weren't feeling really great about it but wanted to play an anime game or something. And like BlazBlue has always kind of had a tumultuous history like in North America as far as popularity goes at least. So it was just kind of a perfect storm, I think. That's the only way I can describe it. I'm still like in awe sometimes.
To me, I wasn't as like shocked as everybody else was because I've seen communities grow and prosper and I've seen them like just die horrible deaths. So for just Under Night to go from 70 something, 80 something, and then double that with the English version, it's like, well, that's something obvious, or that's something that just happens in fighting games. But then you add the fact that Uni doubled and a half the following combo breaker. It's like, whoa, like that's big. Now you're playing with fire. It was something that was definitely something I've never seen before, and I've been playing fighting games for like over a decade.
The numbers have just been continuously going up. There was a period last year where every single major tournament broke the record. I think Otaku 2017 was the first big ST tournament, and then Combo Breaker comes out with some crazy number too. I think it was like either high hundreds or it was like low 200s. And then Evo side event was also like mid 200s or something like that. And then CEO Taku had even more. It was like ridiculous. As far as numbers goes, those three were the big ones, and they just kept getting bigger and bigger. So we're back to 2019. Combo Breaker breaking all the previous records yet again actually is just on curve with my predictions.
The interesting thing I think about the current state of Under Night is like tournament-wise and everything like that. In North America, it's much bigger here than it is in Japan. So like the players have been playing for much longer, but like we keep upping the number, but like people really just showed enthusiasm and just wanted to come and collect together.
That boom isn't too surprising to me because a lot of it is just kind of the momentum that was the early EL momentum, but it just kind of got stifled by that delayed console port. So as soon as the console port actually came out, I think a lot of the players just, the community kind of just took that momentum back, and that's kind of how we got here.
While Under Night has always had homes at tournaments like CEO Taku and Combo Breaker, there's another event that has become synonymous with the community. Climax of Night, a French-bred centric major in Atlanta, Georgia, was created by anime OG Shinobi and his team to celebrate games like Under Night and Melty Blood, further pushing these titles to the forefront.
So with 2018, that final round was supposedly the last final round. So with that, there was pretty much like a questionable void in Atlanta itself. And I wanted to be sure that Atlanta themselves had an event for, just fighting games, period. But I said, if I was going to run an event ever, because I was always against like having that amount of pressure and stuff. Like I can't do all that stuff that Rick does and Jabali does. They're crazy. But for me, I told myself if I was gonna run an event, I was gonna run wherever I wanted to run and play wherever I wanted to play. And for me, there were already enough tournaments that showcased casually familiar games like, the Street Fighters, the Tekkens, but when it comes to anime, everybody knows Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear has this like long bridal history with Evo, and it's been, everywhere a day and a half. With Under Night, it's a little different. Under Night is very spotty when it comes to like awareness in the competitive scene. You only have like maybe 4 or 5 like really big tournaments out of the year to be able to say, okay, that's a uni major, that's where we're gonna go. But I was like, how about we run something that uni's the only game that you only have to think about as a major, as the highlight. I think that alone gives Climax of Night a very different approach in everything that we do, whether it be like with like production or promotion or however we do anything when it pertains to Climax of Night, because we're only focused on one community.
I knew that Shinobi did good work like with Final Round on the anime side, so he was a trusted member of the community. It's like, okay, he's treated anime well before. People know him, people trust him. He's big in the Melty Blood scene. Let's do it. Like, this is the perfect time. Because like after Evo and Combo Breaker and like CEO, there's a big gap before the next year flips over. So it's like, this is the perfect time. So like, why not? Let's have Climax and CEO Taku fill that role.
Climax of Night was kind of, I think, Shinobi's way to kind of bring people together again and really unite under that banner of, anime, of niche, of French bread, of whatever you want to call it, and just have a good time. And I went to the first one, it was fantastic. I think the sentiment repeated by most of the participants was that it did feel like a tournament from back in 2005 or something like that. That was the coolest thing for me, for so many people, was just that, yeah, it was like you went there, you played games with people and you kicked it. And very back to the Grassroots aesthetic, the feel, really the atmosphere. And because it really was Grassroots, right? It really is just Shinobi and his boys getting together to put on an event just for the hell of it, just to support the games, no money in it or whatever. And it worked amazingly.
Pin, please! Pin! Let's get it! Everybody's hyped.
It felt like the subject of the event was the players, that it was a group of players, a group of people there for each other, If you just look at the crowd, I think it's pretty obvious that everyone is really there, aware of the people next to them, really all getting together to really cheer and get hype for the game and the celebration of the game, I feel like.
What a bet! He doesn't spin his meter, he doesn't. That's it! It's over!
It's over!
Breaker J! Hailing from Southern California, he is your Climax of Night. Tournament there, show me the camera!
Even with Under Night building steam heading into 2019, few had any hope left for it to be featured as a main game at EVO. This changed, however, when in February 2019, on the show announcing the titles for that year's event, Mr. Wizard had a surprising announcement.
You know, EVO's had its ear to the ground. We've been listening to the community and listening to the fans and kind of figuring out what they want. And I think it's time that this community actually gets to shine. They've been doing a great job of kind of supporting their game throughout the year and maybe further, but I definitely think that it's time for them to make their game a main title at EVO 2019. So for the first time ever, we're proud to announce that Under Night in Birth, executable, latest, or as the cool kids say, UNIST is a title for EVO 2019.
There was talk early in that year, you know, people were whispering, you know, maybe this year for Uni, you know, the numbers have been pretty good, you know, maybe Uni will make it this year. But after that 1 year, 2014 and 15, no Uni all, I think a lot of us kind of got our hopes and dreams dashed away. So for most of us, and for me definitely, it was just completely out of left field. I was actually in the car on the way from work when it happened. So I was like trying not to crash. I was like reading my timeline and like I need to get back home just to jump on Twitter, not even do anything, just literally jump on Twitter and see people and get excited with everybody. It was an amazing time.
Yo, let's fucking go. I'm not pulling over for this shit. Fucking let's go.
As for my reaction, like candidly, I kind of slumped back like, fuck, this is another tournament. Cause like, I'm sponsored by Sugoi Factory, and so I'm able to go to more events than usual. This is now another major that I have to budget for, because I'm in school and I work at the same time too. It's like, fuck, now even if I like had misgivings, like maybe EVO wouldn't treat us right really as a tournament, it'd be rushed, blah, blah, blah. Now I have to go. It's EVO, you have to go. As hype went and like we knew that Japan was actually interested for the first time coming over in mass, like our top players like Red Blade and Squish were like, this is the real thing. Like we're now able to play against these people that we've only been watching on streams.
I went with a bunch of other American players over to KSB in Japan this year, and it was really fun seeing firsthand the excitement from the JP players, you know, people just talking about, even the players who can't go, they're talking about EVO, they're talking about the tournament, talking about who's gonna be there.
The big thing is like Uni, up to this point, is like one of the smaller games in Japan. Like French Bread's a small studio. They don't really have a whole lot of money to be putting on a bunch of like things. As far as Uni goes, Clear Lamp is now the first signed player. And that was just before this tournament. So he's like a talent director or something like that now, but like he's the first one. He's the only one. So like that should probably tell you the type of like community and like scene that they have. Like they're kind of small but dedicated. So like a lot of them are salarymen, and so like, you know, the salaryman blow up, you can't really travel. There were people that were like joking, like I went to EVO and I had to like put it, like I got fired to come to EVO because the grind is that much. But like people felt like it's EVO, now it's here, we have to go. And so I think we got like 30 or so Japanese players that came over.
There's a lot of people just really interested in the outcome of the event. And yeah, I mean, I don't even care who wins, I just know that the whole tournament is gonna be amazing because it's gonna be, I mean, it's an EVO main game. So it's the kind of thing that most players of niche games really just can only dream of, because I think that the last time that kind of thing happened, like Uni, was really, what Melty Blow was a main game. So that was 10 years ago. So basically, from my perspective, it's been 10 years since a niche game got shot at EVO. There's been other anime games in the past, but Uni is like Smash in the beginning too, you know, really a game that got there just through that effort, you know, through that grassroots push to get those numbers. So for me, the biggest thing I tell people with regards to the announcement is that it's such a good sign, as far as from my perspective, that EVO is really, you know, on point looking at the communities and seeing what's being represented, seeing what people want. So the fact that Uni got this shot is really, really good. I think it's, regardless of what happens, for other games too, they can look at Uni as really an example that can happen. So.
Under Night and its community have come a long way since their beginnings, and with a new update announced, as well as being featured once again at EVO 2020, neither looks to be stopping anytime soon, and everyone has their own hopes for the future of Uni.
I come from a perspective where I helped run these Uni tournaments that were, the first year at EVO, I think maybe like 80, something like that, and even then that was like incredible. Very used to, for all the other games that I helped support, low numbers, and used to basically helping run events and communities with no real future beyond whatever we pick up ourselves with our own weight, So I'm not really expecting something like, a circuit or further expansion for Uni. I think I'd be pretty okay if after EVO that was it and we just kept playing the game, because the game's fun, community has fun, and there's people playing it, and that's kind of all I need, and I think that's all a lot of people need. Obviously, there are people who want more and more and more, but I feel like we're already blessed with such a good opportunity as it is. It's my hope that at the very least the community gets to a level where it's self-sufficient, where that it can basically continue to bring new players in, because that's usually where some niche games lose all their momentum, basically, is when they can't bring new players in and they're kind of just stuck with what's left with the hardcore players basically, who are not going to move on. But it's really important to be able to bring new players into a game and just get that fresh blood.
The future is probably no different than what it was like 5 or 6 years ago. The cornerstones, the people that are behind the community are still going strong, and with this new version, it generally just naturally generates a lot of hype. So for these guys to keep growing and never seem to fall off 2 years after a Japanese release, even in this era of patches and consistent updates and season passes and stuff, is definitely a testament to not only Under Night specifically, but to fighting games in general, that if people are around the game and they love the game and they put all this time into the game and they still go out to these tournaments, spend their money and sacrifice their time to go out to these tournaments and have fun and play these games, then I think with a new version, it's just going to continuously keep growing and growing so long as the community is open and just able to keep playing the game.
Thanks for watching our documentary on Under Night In-Birth and its community. Our docs are made possible by support from our patrons, like these guys. If you like what you saw and want to support us making more documentaries like this, consider becoming a patron today at patreon.com/holdbacktoblock. Until next time.